ever feel like just getting through the day is a total struggle, let alone like actually thriving.
Right.
Now imagine doing that in a place where it's either like scorching hot or freezing cold all the time.
Oh, and barely any water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're diving into the world of plants that not only survive in these kinds of crazy places, but actually thrive in them.
Talk about resilience.
More than resilience, it's like straight up ingenious adaptation.
Absolutely. They've evolved these, you could call them superpowers, I guess, to not only cope, but actually turn those brutal conditions into like an advantage.
Okay, see, that's what I find so fascinating. For this deep dive, we've got articles about plants all over.
Deserts, yeah.
Salty coasts.
Frozen zones.
And even places that are constantly blasted by wind.
Oh, wow.
And get this, we've also got some articles about what people are doing to prepare for droughts. You know, all the prepper stuff.
Interesting.
Turns out, we humans might have a thing or two to learn from these botanical badasses.
Indeed. Some really remarkable parallels, actually, between the strategies of these plants and the things that people are doing to get ready for scarcity.
So, what are we waiting for? Let's uncover the secrets of these plant superheroes. But first, I think it's important to paint a picture of just how brutal some of these environments really are. We're talking like extremes, right?
Oh, absolutely. The whole spectrum. Scorching deserts, relentless sun, almost no water, like where the iconic baobab tree lives.
Right.
Then you've got coastal areas with super high salinity, pushing plants like glasswort to the absolute edge of survival. And then, of course, you have the frigid zones where only the toughest, most specialized plants like Arctic moss can make it through the long winters.
And don't forget those incredibly windswept places.
Oh, right, where plants basically have to like cling to the earth just to survive.
Wow, just surviving in those places sounds like a full-time job.
It is.
But these plants are doing more than just surviving. They're finding ways to actually thrive. So let's dig into how they do it.
Okay.
What's their secret weapon?
Well, let's start with the most pressing issue in a lot of these environments. Water scarcity. Plants in these regions have evolved this amazing range of strategies to conserve water. It's really remarkable.
Okay, so what's their secret? Is it all about deep roots?
Well, deep roots play a role for sure, but there's so much more going on. Think about the baobab tree, for instance. Its massive trunk, acts like this giant water tank.
Oh, wow.
It can store up to 100,000 liters of water, enough to make it through even the longest droughts.
100,000 liters. That's like enough to fill a swimming pool. But what about plants that don't have that kind of storage capacity? How do they cope?
They've become masters of minimizing water loss. Take lithops, for example. They're sometimes called living stones because they've evolved to look just like, pebbles.
Wait, so they're camouflaging themselves to avoid being eaten?
Well, that's part of it, but their camouflage also serves a very practical purpose. That stone-like shape reduces their surface area, which minimizes water loss through transpiration.
Oh, so it's like a 2-for-1 adaptation.
Exactly.
That is so clever. It's like they figured out how to make the absolute most of what little they have. Makes you wonder if there are any parallels there to the way some humans are preparing for drought.
You're absolutely right. The prepper articles we have really emphasize water conservation as like a key strategy. Things like rainwater harvesting systems, low flow appliances, even simple techniques like putting a brick in your toilet tank to reduce water usage. It's all about making every single drop count.
It's amazing how these survival strategies, whether for plants or people, kind of echo each other. Like we're all tapping into the same like fundamental principles.
Yeah.
But let's move on to plants that, well, don't just stand their ground. What about the ones that don't have the luxury of a giant trunk or a rocky disguise? How do they deal with drought?
Some plants have adopted a more, shall we say, mobile approach. Think of the tumbleweed.
Oh, yeah?
It doesn't try to fight the drought head on. Instead, it breaks off from its roots and tumbles with the winds, scattering its seeds all over the place.
So it's like nature's version of the seed-sowing drone. Just spreading its chances, hoping some seeds will land in a more hospitable spot. It's almost like a nomadic lifestyle.
Precisely. And it's interesting to note that the prepper articles also put a lot of emphasis on saving seeds, particularly of the drought-resistant varieties. It's like just like the tumbleweed, they want to make sure they have a food supply in the future.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got the stay putters and the nomads, but water isn't the only challenge, is it?
No, definitely not.
What about the extremes of hot and cold? How do plants handle those crazy temperature swings?
Well, when it comes to heat, some plants have developed these remarkable adaptations to not only survive, but actually thrive in scorching temperatures. The giant sequoia, for example, one of the largest and oldest living organisms on Earth.
Okay, I'm picturing those massive trees in California. The ones that look like they've been around since, like, the dinosaurs.
Exactly. And you know what one of their keys to survival is?
What's that?
Their incredibly thick, fire-resistant bark. It acts like a shield, basically, protecting them from wildfires that, sweep through their habitat every so often.
So they've evolved to actually withstand fire.
They have.
That's almost counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I guess in a fire-prone environment, it makes sense. It's like they've turned a threat into a survival advantage. But what about the other end of the spectrum? How do plants deal with, like, extreme cold?
Plants in really cold zones have their own set of remarkable adaptations. Take Arctic moss, for example. It thrives in a world where the ground is frozen solid for most of the year.
I can't even imagine trying to grow anything in that kind of environment. How does it even survive?
Well, for one thing, Arctic moss has incredible insulation properties, and it's not just about staying warm, it's also about resource management. This moss can actually store nutrients for really long periods of time, allowing it to just kickstart growth as soon as conditions get even a little bit better.
So it's like they've got their own built-in winter survival kit.
Right.
Makes our winter coat seem pretty basic. Okay, what about high altitudes? Those thin air, intense solar radiation situations.
Another challenge altogether. Plants like the Ureta, which is found in the Andes Mountains, have adapted by growing in this dense, compact form, almost like a cushion hugging the ground. This helps conserve heat and resist the wind.
So it's like a natural windbreaker and thermal blanket all in one. These adaptations are truly remarkable. I'm starting to feel a bit inadequate over here with my houseplant struggles. What else is on this plant superpowers list?
Well, we've talked about deserts, freezing wastelands, windy mountains, all incredibly tough environments. But we can't forget another extreme habitat, places with high salinity.
You mean like coastal areas where the ocean spray kind of coats everything in salt?
Exactly. Most plants would really struggle to survive in conditions like that. But some have actually evolved to not just tolerate, but thrive in these salty environments. One example is glasswort.
Glasswort.
It's a succulent. You find it in salt marshes and coastal areas all around the world.
So how does it handle all that salt? Does it develop a taste for it?
Not quite. It's developed these specialized cells that can remove salt from its system.
Wait, are you saying these plants are essentially filtering out the salt? That's amazing. Do you think, could we humans learn something from that? Especially with fresh water becoming more and more scarce, desalination is kind of a big deal for us.
That's a fascinating question. And, there is a growing interest in salt-tolerant plants, particularly for sustainable agriculture, especially in areas facing water shortages or dealing with rising sea levels.
Okay, now that's where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about plants surviving. We're talking about them, potentially providing solutions for some of the biggest challenges we humans are facing. This is why I love these deep dives. But before we get too carried away, let's take a step back and see how these plant adaptations line up with the human strategies we found in those prepper articles.
Okay.
What connections did you find?
The parallels are remarkable. We already touched on the emphasis on water conservation, right? Both plants and preppers using techniques like rainwater harvesting and just being super efficient with water usage.
Right, like everyone's trying to squeeze the most out of every drop. What other connections did you find?
Well, remember the tumbleweed and its seed dispersal strategy?
Yeah.
That links directly to the prepper's focus on seed saving, especially for those drought-resistant varieties.
Right, the nomadic plant and the prepper stocking up for a potential crisis.
Exactly. It's all about making sure there's a future food supply, no matter what happens.
Okay, that's a good one. Are there any others?
Well, think about how sea thrift can withstand those intense coastal winds.
Right, it's practically glued to the ground.
Exactly. And that low, sturdy profile, it's actually a design principle that humans have also adopted, especially in areas that are really windy.
So we're talking low-profile buildings, windbreaks, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It's really quite amazing how nature has already solved so many of the problems that, that we humans are still grappling with.
For sure. Any other parallels?
Well, there's one that's maybe a bit less obvious. Community networking.
Okay.
You see, a lot of plants rely on interconnected root systems or clonal colonies to to share resources and support each other.
So it's like they've got a built-in support system.
Precisely. And that's something that comes up a lot in the prepper articles as well.
Oh, interesting.
Building those strong community networks, sharing resources and skills. They see that as being absolutely crucial for navigating tough times, whether you're a plant facing a drought or a community facing a crisis. It's a real we're in this together kind of mentality.
Community over competition.
I love that. Okay, we've covered a lot here, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of how amazing these plants are. What else can you tell me? Give me those fascinating facts that'll make me the envy of all my plant-loving friends.
Okay, how about this? Did you know that baobab trees can live for over 1,000 years?
1,000 years. Now that's what I call long-term planning. Imagine all the stories a tree that old could tell. What else?
Then there's the welwitschia. It's a remarkable plant found in the Namib Desert, and it's one of the longest living plants on Earth. Some individuals are estimated to be over 2,000 years old.
Wow, older than some ancient civilizations. What's its secret? Does it have some sort of anti-aging potion hidden in its roots?
Well, one of its most remarkable features is that it only ever grows 2 leaves. And those 2 leaves just continue to grow throughout its entire lifespan.
Hold on, just 2 leaves for its whole life? That's incredible.
It is. And those leaves can grow to be several meters long. They get really tattered and weathered over time, but they never fall off. Okay, that one is definitely going in my mental plant encyclopedia. What else have you got?
How about this? The ureta, that high-altitude cushion plant we talked about earlier, grows unbelievably slowly.
Slowly like how?
We're talking about 1 millimeter per year.
1 millimeter a year. That's practically standing still. It would take centuries for it to reach any significant size.
Exactly. Its slow growth is really a testament to its resilience and its amazing ability to conserve resources in such a harsh environment.
These plants are truly mind-blowing. It's like they've unlocked the secrets of longevity and resilience. It makes you wonder if we humans could learn to tap into some of that ancient wisdom.
I think we can, and that's what we'll explore in part 2 of this deep dive.
Ooh, now you've got me hooked. I can't wait to hear more. But for now, we'll have to leave our listeners hanging. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into how humans are taking inspiration from these amazing plant adaptations. We'll talk about how they are developing innovative solutions for a more sustainable and resilient future.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of plants that thrive in those extreme environments.
We saw how those botanical superheroes can survive, like everything.
Yeah. From
scorching deserts to freezing tundras.
And it's not just about surviving, is it? They're actually thriving in these incredibly harsh conditions. It's like they've, cracked the code for resilience or something.
You got it. And like we were talking about last time, humans are starting to pay attention to those secrets, especially when it comes to things like drought and resource scarcity.
Okay, so how are we humans taking cues from these plant masters? Are we talking about, planting more cacti in our backyards? Well, it's a bit more sophisticated than that, although xeriscaping with drought-tolerant plants is definitely, a good first step. But what's really exciting is this field called biomimicry.
Biomimicry?
Yeah.
So it's like we're saying, hey, nature's been doing this really well for millions of years. Maybe we should, pay attention.
Exactly. For example, look at the cactus. Engineers are studying its system of spines, pores, and ribs.
Oh, wow.
To design more efficient ways to collect and store rainwater, especially in those dry regions.
Ah, so it's not just about copying the cactus's shape. It's about, understanding the principles behind how it collects water so efficiently.
You got it.
What else have we got in this biomimicry toolbox?
Well, architects are looking at, how desert plants create shade and keep themselves cool. Wow. To design buildings that can stay cool in those hot climates without having to rely so much on air conditioning, which uses tons of energy.
That's brilliant. It's like bringing the desert's natural cooling system into our cities.
Exactly. And the applications go way beyond just water and temperature. Researchers are also looking at, for instance, the structure of plants like bamboo.
Oh, yeah.
Super strong, but also super lightweight.
Right.
To try and develop new building materials.
So we could be seeing houses and bridges made from plant-inspired materials.
It's definitely possible.
That's a total game changer.
And it fits in perfectly with the need for more sustainable and resilient infrastructure, especially with climate change and all that.
Okay, so biomimicry is all about taking design cues from nature. But what about the actual processes that plants use to survive? Can we learn anything from those?
Oh, absolutely. Remember that resurrection plant? The one that can, come back from the dead after totally drying out?
Yeah, that one blew my mind. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Well, scientists are studying the biochemistry behind that, how those plants can tolerate extreme dehydration.
Okay, that sounds pretty complex. What's the takeaway for us, non-scientists?
The hope is that understanding those mechanisms could lead to breakthroughs in things like agriculture or even medicine.
So, like, imagine crops that can withstand drought, or even medical treatments that can, preserve organs for transplants.
Exactly. The potential is huge. And we're really just starting to, scratch the surface of what we can learn from these plants.
This is so inspiring. It feels like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs.
We are. But it's not just about the high-tech stuff. There are also a lot of low-tech traditional practices that can help us learn from plants.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What kind of traditional practices are we talking about?
Well, think about indigenous communities around the world. They've been living in harmony with these, often challenging environments for centuries.
Right.
They have this deep understanding of the plants and ecosystems that support them.
They've had to adapt to survive. It's like their knowledge has been passed down for generations.
Exactly. And there's so much we can learn from their knowledge and practices. Things like using drought-resistant crops, implementing water harvesting techniques, practicing sustainable land management methods.
It makes you realize how out of touch we've become with that ancient wisdom. We've become so reliant on technology that we've forgotten some of those simpler but effective solutions that nature has to offer.
It's not about rejecting technology, though.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Right.
Blending those traditional practices with modern innovation.
So we've got biomimicry, traditional knowledge, cutting-edge research, all inspired by the resilience of plants. It's pretty clear that these botanical wonders have a lot to teach us.
They do. And maybe the most important lesson is one of adaptation and perseverance.
Right. It's not about fighting against nature. It's about learning to work with it.
Exactly. To embrace the challenges and find those creative solutions.
Plants have been doing this for millions of years, evolving and adapting to survive and thrive, even in the toughest conditions. And we can do the same, learn from nature's wisdom, and build a more resilient future for ourselves.
That's a powerful message, and I think it's one that we can all really take to heart. But, there's another layer to this whole plant resilience thing that I find really fascinating.
Oh, tell me more.
Okay.
Well, we've been talking about all the practical applications of plant adaptations, but what about the deeper implications for us as humans? I mean, these plants aren't just surviving. They're thriving in conditions that we would consider incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what are we capable of? What hidden reserves of strength and resilience do we have?
I see what you're saying. It's almost like these plants are challenging our assumptions about what's possible.
Yeah.
About the limits of our own endurance.
Exactly. And it's not just physical resilience, right? It's mental and emotional resilience too. If a plant can find a way to thrive in the face of adversity, well, maybe we can too.
It's a profound thought. It makes me think of something Viktor Frankl once wrote. He was a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist. He said that man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life, not just some side effect of our instincts. And this meaning, it's unique. It has to be individually and personally discovered.
Wow, that's pretty deep. But I see the connection.
And I think it applies here. These plants, in their own way, are showing us the power of finding meaning and purpose. Even when things are really, really tough, they're not just surviving, they're living their best lives, fulfilling their potential, even in the harshest environments.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it. And it makes you wonder, what seemingly impossible situations in our own lives might actually be opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
What challenges are we facing that with a little bit of that plant-like resilience, we could actually overcome?
It's a great question to think about. And maybe the answer is embracing a bit of that botanical wisdom, learning to adapt, to persevere, and to find meaning, even when things are tough.
Okay, so we've gone from the nitty-gritty of plant adaptations to this big picture idea of human potential and resilience. It feels like we've tapped into something really profound here. But I know there's more to this story, right?
There is.
What else yet?
We've looked at the amazing adaptations of individual plants and how those can be important for us humans. But there's one more crucial aspect we need to talk about: the interconnectedness of all living things.
Ah, yes. The web of life. It's all connected.
It is. And understanding that is essential if we truly want to learn from plants and, build a more sustainable and resilient future.
Okay, what do you mean by interconnectedness in this context?
Well, remember that plants aren't just like isolated individuals. They're part of complex ecosystems, interacting with other plants, animals, fungi, microorganisms, all in these intricate ways.
Right, it's like a whole community all working together.
Exactly. And those relationships are super important for the health and resilience of the whole ecosystem. Think about the mycorrhizal fungi, for example. They form these symbiotic relationships with plant roots, helping those plants get nutrients and water more efficiently.
It's like a team effort.
It is.
Everyone doing their part to support the community.
Exactly. And when we talk about learning from plants, it's not just about copying their individual adaptations. It's about understanding those relationships.
Yeah.
Figuring out how we can support the health and resilience of whole ecosystems.
That makes sense. So instead of just focusing on like drought-resistant crops, we should also be thinking about how to protect the soil, the pollinators, and all the other, essential parts of a healthy ecosystem.
Exactly. It's about taking that holistic approach, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that we're all part of this web of life and that our actions can have ripple effects throughout that web.
And that brings us back to resilience, right?
Which it does.
It's not just about individual strength. It's about the strength of the whole system.
Exactly. And when we talk about building a resilient future, it's not just about, stronger buildings or drought-resistant crops. It's about those healthy ecosystems, supporting biodiversity, and strengthening our connection to the natural world.
It's like we're all in this together, humans and plants.
Yeah.
And we need to, cooperate and support each other if we want to thrive.
I completely agree. And maybe the most important step we can take is to cultivate a sense of awe and wonder for nature. To appreciate the beauty and ingenuity of plants, to recognize how vital they are to life on Earth.
I love that. It's not just about studying plants. It's about appreciating them,
Yeah,
respecting them, and realizing how much we have to learn from them.
indeed. And maybe in that process of learning and appreciating, we'll also discover a deeper connection to ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From individual plants to entire ecosystems to this, amazing sense of interconnectedness. What a journey.
It has been. And as we wrap up this part of our exploration, I'm left feeling both hopeful and, I guess, a sense of urgency.
Hope because of all the amazing potential, right?
Yeah.
For innovation and resilience that we've seen. And urgency because we've got some real challenges ahead that we need to address now.
Exactly. But I really believe that by embracing the lessons from these plant superheroes, their adaptations, their interconnectedness, their perseverance, we can rise to the occasion and create a better future for ourselves and the planet.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to part 3, where we'll get into some practical tips on how to bring some of this plant-inspired resilience into our own lives, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
What's one small step you can take today to connect with nature and cultivate a bit of that plant-like resilience in your own life? Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. It's all about plant resilience. We've gone from those mind-blowing adaptations of individual plants all the way to the web of life that connects everything.
Yeah, now we're going to bring it all home. Let's shift from the theoretical to the practical.
Yeah.
How can we take these amazing plant lessons and apply them to our own lives?
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those plant-powered resilience tips.
Yeah.
What do our listeners need to know?
All right, well, the first one might seem pretty basic, but honestly, it's so important. And in our crazy busy lives, it's often overlooked.
What is it?
Spend time in nature.
So, get off our screens and go touch some grass.
Pretty much. Even a short walk in the park, or tending a garden or just sitting under a tree. It can do wonders for you, mentally and emotionally.
I can definitely vouch for that.
And it's not just about feeling good, right? It's about that reconnection with nature, observing how it works, remembering that we're part of something much, much bigger than ourselves.
I always feel so much more grounded and centered after spending time outdoors. It's like nature just has this way of calming all the chaos of everyday life.
Exactly. And, by watching how plants thrive in those tough environments, I think we can really start to appreciate their resilience and maybe even internalize those lessons a bit.
It's like they're showing us by example, right? We can weather those storms too.
That's it. So, make an effort to really immerse yourself in nature, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Notice the plants, their adaptations, and let their resilience inspire you.
Okay, great first step. What else can we do to boost our plant-powered resilience?
Here's another one. Learn about the plants that are right there in your area.
You mean more than just knowing if something's a tree or a flower?
Exactly. Get curious. What are the names of those trees, flowers, shrubs you see every day? What are their adaptations? Any traditional uses? What's their role in the ecosystem? The more you know, the more you'll appreciate their complexity and resilience.
And I guess the more we appreciate them, the more we'll want to protect them, right?
Absolutely. Knowledge leads to respect. And a sense of stewardship, you know. Plus, learning about plants can open up all sorts of possibilities. You might discover you've got edible or medicinal plants growing right in your backyard.
Okay, so we're talking foraging, making our own herbal remedies, really getting in tune with nature's bounty. I'm liking this.
That's the idea. And that actually leads right into our next tip. Practice mindful consumption.
Okay, mindful consumption. What's that look like in a plant-inspired context?
Think about how resourceful plants are. I mean, they have to be. They've evolved to do so much with, very limited water, nutrients, sunlight. We can totally apply those same principles to our own lives, right? By just being more aware of our consumption habits.
So reduce waste, be more efficient with resources, make sure we're choosing sustainable products.
Exactly. Think about your water usage, the food you eat, your clothes, how much energy you use. Are there ways to lessen your impact? Make better choices.
It's not about deprivation, right?
No, not at all.
It's more about being intentional, making choices that, align with our values.
Exactly. And honestly, mindful consumption can actually make your life more fulfilling. When you stop focusing on getting more stuff and start appreciating what you already have, well, you make space for more meaningful experiences and deeper connections.
Like the minimalist thing, but with a plant-inspired twist.
I like that. It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
where we can meet our needs without putting too much strain on the planet.
These are great tips. It's really all connected, isn't it?
It is.
Shifting our mindset, becoming more aware, making choices that, show respect for ourselves and the natural world.
You nailed it. And that actually brings us to our final and maybe most important tip. Cultivate a growth mindset.
Ah, yes, the power of mindset. It's amazing how our thoughts can really shape our reality.
Remember that resurrection plant?
Yeah.
Its ability to bounce back from, extreme dryness. That's a perfect example of a growth mindset. Instead of giving up when things get tough, it adapts, it perseveres, and it finds a way to keep growing.
It's like those plants are saying, hey, challenges. Those are just opportunities in disguise.
Exactly. We can totally adopt that same mindset. It's about embracing challenges, right? Seeing them as opportunities for growth, believing in our ability to learn and adapt, focusing on solutions instead of dwelling on problems.
That's not about being perfect, is it?
No.
It's about being willing to try, to maybe mess up, and to keep learning along the way.
Exactly. A growth mindset lets us see setbacks as temporary and to learn from those experiences.
So to sum up this whole awesome deep dive, I think we can say that plant-inspired resilience is about way more than just surviving. It's about thriving. It's about connecting with nature, being mindful of our consumption, and embracing a growth mindset so that we can adapt and flourish no matter what challenges come our way.
Well said. And as we all navigate this crazy 21st century, those qualities are more important than ever.
Couldn't agree more. So, dear listeners, we encourage you to take these plant-inspired lessons to heart. Cultivate your own resilience and let those amazing plants be your guide. Until next time, happy exploring.